Hi guys. I've met all of you, so it's pretty easy to talk. I do mostly paper collage, and and spray paint is usually ends up being part of it. I've got two more pieces up there, but my pieces were more about the concept of a spirit of a place. So if a place had eyes and ears and a personality, especially after as we as humans like personify things or anthropomorphize things, we end up giving a face to something. So like the city of New York is you know is its own creature, or Portland and Vancouver can be their own place, with personality and with expression and living and dying. And so this for me is more about a city that has sunken, and this is the spirit of that city under the ocean. But for the most part, when I'm making something, I don't know what I'm doing, and then I slowly things come together, and then maybe I'll look up some ideas or mythological concepts, and then keep pushing in those directions. And then that's basically what a lot of my work ends up being. So, any questions?
Do you typically do the collages first,
About
or does it come together as you're kind of
both. Sometimes I like my mythological concepts or tropes or like Jungian um, ideas. So maybe I'll do a whole series of um, gods and goddesses that represent wintertime or snow, and I'll do all that research first, and then try to figure out how I represent, Freya from Norse mythology, goddess of snow and skiing and things like that. So, but other times it'll kind of just come maybe after it's done. Maybe I'll do research after it's completely completed, and then put a title to it, and it becomes something else. So
because the medium, fans
yeah,
start looking for images.
yeah,
And in that process, you got to find images that you were thinking this, but maybe you start to see ties and whatnot.
yeah,
It's really interesting, but very fluid medium that way.
definitely. And I get the joy of throughout almost all the process of moving things around completely. And those of you that work in clay, you kind of have to have an idea beforehand, I know. But I get to play with it compositionally for days before I even have to use glue. And then eventually I have to be like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work. And then I have to rip something off. But sure, yeah. So some of this, the paper already has, I put spray paint on. And then this one, I kind of smudged some yellow paint onto it to give it more distressed look. Um, I don't use a brush too often anymore with an acrylic paint, so it's spray paint tends to be more of a thing for me to just color and give different tones.
So where do you find images? Hardly ever have magazines.
True.
Used to be collages from
Yeah.
magazines, and now I'm seeing people
It's
put
less.
their own images in collages.
That's really common and super popular to work on your own textures and then use that for, especially if you're doing something like an abstract collage. And we do that here. So on every second Saturday, I host a little collage day, and anybody can come and make collages all day. And it could be abstract, it could be representative. But every second Saturday of the month, from noon to 5, I put out tables and have material for everybody. You can bring family and just come and hang out.
You didn't answer the question. You look for multiple sources.
So I do. So honestly, what I go to a lot is vintage stores, Goodwill retails. Honestly, the library has their little book sale area, and they have image books there. Um, it's good to find. And if people know that you're looking for things like that, they might have a stash of old National Geographics that they don't need anymore, and they need a new home. And they're not, maybe they're a little moldy. They're not worth keeping, but they are worth cutting up and repurposing. Yeah.
What is your biggest challenge with this art
For me, it's endless possibilities and not having any firm like rules about it. So I have to give myself parameters. And something like this where there's a deadline, that was really nice because then I have to make those decisions a little more firmly. But yeah, not having a complete, having endless amount of like content I could switch in and out is probably the biggest challenge because it's just too many choices. Decision fatigue, they call it. Yeah. Anybody else?
How do you call a work done? Is it, like with the puzzle game? I
Yeah.
have 4 pieces left to do, and I'm getting there. Or is it like you don't even know until you get there?
Sometimes I have to put something on the wall and then wait a week or two and decide if that is actually finished or if I hate it. Or put something on the wall upside down and stare at it like that and decide it's really imbalanced and I hate it. But it's worse if I overwork something because then it's hard for me to take steps backward. Because then I would have to basically admit defeat maybe and repurpose the whole thing.
Once you
Mhm.
fix it, it will work, isn't it done?
That is a good time for me to say it's done, yes, but then you never know what I'll decide. Welcome. No guarding this place. But yeah, I have a couple more upstairs, and one of them I tried to keep with this theme of how we interact with the earth. It's actually made out of what was a kitchen scale that had died, and instead of throwing it away, I painted over it because it already has a key hook on the back. So I painted over that and repurposed it. So I was trying to keep electronics out of the landfill, and I'd like to do more of those kinds of things, but I can't hoard every object that I should get rid of. But thank you guys, and I hope to see you for Collage Day. Yeah.
Unless it falls off. Okay, my process is way more loose than he implies. I'm smiling as he's saying this. I start with a general concept, something I want to portray, a feeling, an emotion, something like that, and I start building. And oftentimes it winds up going in a different direction than I planned, or I see something that I think, wow, that would be like, I could do this with it. And a lot of times the material just kind of speaks to me. So I would like to say that I start with a loose idea of what I want to do. This was the result of my anger of plastic in the ocean and how we're polluting our oceans and climate change, and my sadness that it seems so long to reverse this and people aren't as enlightened as fast as I think they should be. So interestingly enough, I built this piece and then I attached this plastic to it, which was intentional. So it's now a multimedia piece because I wanted to represent, they're actually those plastic rings around soda pop bottles. And I read somewhere that ducks and fish and things get caught in them. They get their necks caught in them because they're all over the ocean, and then they wind up strangled or they can't eat. I can't tell you how mad and upset that made me, and I read that years ago. So I decided to put that on this piece because I was so mad about that. So I cut all mine up into pieces. So it still has plastic, but it's not a danger to anything. So yes, they can still eat it, but they're not going to strangle on it. So I decided this is the world, round, so it had to be round. So I started with throwing a base and then a round bowl, and I started building from there. So a lot of times I will mix up my throwing and hand building because of a desired result. And so I could have thrown this, but honestly, I'm not that strong of a thrower that I can throw something like that big. So I generally try and hand build those. I coil build for the most part, especially something round because coiling lends itself to round easily. And then I used like press molds for the different fossils. So I did not carve those because I wanted that real fossil-y look to them. So I deliberately just got some press molds and did that. I wanted it to look old and decrepit, not newly carved and pretty. So, so this is the ocean, and it's the rising ocean. And then this is, I started with New York, but after the news the other day, it's probably Miami. So the city is getting smaller and smaller. This is the green space. Here's the sand around it. And then here's the rising oceans. And these are supposed to be waves on the white beach. So this being Miami, that's slowly going to be like the lone city in a land of water as the oceans rise and the oceans die. So it's actually kind of a sad, depressive piece. But so there you have it. Okay, I see that. I see it on his lips already.
Could you say a little more about the fossils? How you got to include them in an equal way with what's going on with
Fish are dying. Mollusks are dying. Rising oceans. I probably should have put coral on there too, because things are dying from all the pollution in the ocean represented by the plastic. So I think that that was my intention with that. You know, it's kind of a dark piece, and I made it not thinking I'm never going to sell it, because who is going to buy something so depressing, right? But I think a part of me, I do beautiful things, but a part of me also wants to say something about some pieces, right? Something about my environment or where I think we're headed. So some of my pieces are political in nature. Yeah, but they're hard to sell. So generally I make them as a statement and then they're just there, or I break them or whatever, you know, because they're not sellable. And I don't want to think that I'm a potter that makes work just for sale. I'm kind of both. I mean, I don't want to make money off of it, but I also I want people to love what I make and to have it in their lives, you know, so there's that. And I also want to raise awareness, which is what this piece is. Like, wake up. Yes. Like, put the plastic in with the clay, it would melt in the kiln. Well, that's kind of what I tried to do. I added it on because I can't fire it on, right? It would melt into a puddle. So I have to add it after the fact. But that's kind of, I mean, I suppose I could integrate it even more, is what you're saying. I have to think about that. See, I get ideas from everywhere. But in this piece, I just wanted it sort of free floating because it's an ocean, right? So I wanted it to float among the dead fish and so forth.
As someone that's not a ceramicist, can you tell me about the color choices and how you kind of gloss on that?
Yes, I'm very intrigued. I'm sure you'll understand this. I'm very intrigued with dry and shiny. So lately I've been doing a lot of juxtaposition between having a shiny part and a very dry part. And this reflects this, obviously, because I use underglazes and glazes. Some are shiny and some are not. And the thing with the underglazes is that they stay put, right? So they're very good for painting windows and skyscrapers and things because they don't run. The fluid ones are very liquid, and so, but I kind of like the dry with the shiny. It's been an intriguing thing. For sometimes I'll do like really dry leaves and then a really shiny bottom, and I just like the juxtaposition of that. Don't know why, it just appeals to me. And I use two kinds of clay. So for this one I used white or a buff clay, but I also use a very dark brown clay, and sometimes golds, darker golds, generally earth tones.
I have a comment as I'm looking at it now, and I don't know if this was intentional, but the city, how all the buildings are kind of together.
They're sort of being, they're melting and sinking. Yeah, so it kind of sinks too, and because the water is going to infiltrate all the sediment under Miami, and what's going to happen? Yeah, so it's actually a very dark piece. Yeah, absolutely true. I understand there's rivers running through Miami now. Beginning of the end, you guys. Anyway, anything else?
This work is called Turbulence, and it's kind of different from other things I do, which are very measured and symmetrical and planned. This piece kind of is a contrast between the gorgeousness of nature, and sometimes that gorgeousness is made even more beautiful by climate change visually, although it's very destructive, like the incredible sunsets get more intense with particles in the air. So this was a sense of the ocean. It's so gorgeous, but now all natural things are a threat to our existence. So my method of working is that this particular one was done on a piece of linen, and I start out just by painting and drawing directly on it, and do that quite a bit. Then I'll add a lot of the elements that I'm adding are cut up pieces of other work or work that I've done to be cut up and put on there, that I painted, drawn, marked on, a lot of pen and ink. So I'm building up layers. And an integral part of what I do is music. So I'm listening very purposely to different types of music. This was a lot of opera, and it's almost like a dance. My involvement with music is part of my work. And so after I get the general shapes laid out, then it's just kind of stream of consciousness by working to the music. As I said, this is different from a lot of my work, which is measured and precise. So the ultimate goal of this is to show the power of nature. And as my husband says, it's trying to take the planet back. And whether human beings will be there or not is up in the air. Nature's not going to disappear. We might. So, any questions?
So you said that I would encourage anybody to come and take a closer look at it too, because you said you cut up a lot of pieces. Can you go back to that and say more about that?
Okay, so I will paint on paper. First, I'll paint directly on the linen. And then I'll go over it, constantly going over with pen and ink, just constantly, or more acrylic or more enamel. And then while I'm doing that, I will collage in other painting that I've done on separately.
Oh,
And then I'll continue to paint over that and ink over that. So it's just like a flow of putting things in there. And then when it's all done, I'll go back, I painted that in, I just, when
are
it's,
these all textiles? They're all fabric, or?
yeah, they're mostly fabric, and then there's some paper that I painted on originally.
Okay.
But the textiles that I put in there are all painted over. So it's not like I'm taking a textile and just directly putting it on there. I painted over it. So I think that was a textile vibe. I went in and pen and inked it and put different colors in and doodled with it. It's kind of like doodling a lot of it, but with intention. And then, the question is, when is it finished? It's like, what did I hear one time? Sometimes you just, you surrender, like when a piece is done. It's just like, I surrender enough, but it's difficult to tell. But in the analysis, I'll go back and add things, and I'll actually paint enamel on there because I like the intenseness with the linear. And it's kind of a dance, kind of a musical
I
experience.
mean, you can see the music in it.
Yeah.
It's very clear that there's
Yeah. And I
rhythm and percussion and.
I remember that one of the things I did when I painted this is I was obsessed with Maria Callas. And I kept playing, I mean, over and over and over her aria, if I'm pronouncing it correct, my mother's dead, my mama morte. And I couldn't play it enough. And other operas. So it, that's it.
Cool. Any other questions?
Um, I was going to ask about color choices, or were you just trying to name colors and then eventually define?
Well, no, I know I wanted it to be blue. I mean, I knew that going in, that that was going to be the underlying color. But I want my work to be pretty, but I also want it to have some cartoony and hard aspects, so it's just not, you know, a potpourri of prettiness. I wanted it to have a edginess to it too. And some of my other work, there's lines that are put on there that are just like comic book graffiti type lines, and other things will be very pastoral. So, thank you, thank you.
It is so cool to hear backstories of the paintings and the sculpture that you see. There's so much more to it, and so I totally appreciate the cave is doing this and giving folks a chance to explain themselves. And in this piece that I submitted, it's called Exploration, or Investigation rather, and it was born actually last year. In August last year, I was reading Cave Invitations, and there was something about the about Paul Gauguin's masterpiece and the statement that he put on there, where are we going and how we know when we get there, kind of a thing. And that has been sitting with me ever since we came out of COVID isolation, which I think is post-COVID, we're sort of all collectively underestimating the power of that event. I can't imagine another time in recent history where everybody just said, hey, let's chill. Why don't we all just go to our room and think things over for a little bit and decide, you know, where are we going? And it was about that time that call went out and got me thinking philosophically about the depth of that question. But the investigation that I really wanted all these figurines to be exploring has to do with some real basic elements, and I was interested in Linda's piece with the fossils on it because post-COVID, I dove into philosophy and I dove into science books, and every time I go to reach for a book, it seems like it's about one of those two topics. The deeper thinking about where are we coming from. So I thought about what Paul Gauguin asked, the question, and I'm thinking, I want to rephrase that a little bit. For me, the question is, who are we? Individual choice. Each of us has to kind of individually come to who are we. And for my journey, it started way back when I first started having such kind of thoughts about what is our shared creation story. And at some point, you start giving up some of the mythology that you were told as a child is the way things are, and you enter into a whole nother world, which is asking yourself the question, who am I? And this is a lifelong, obviously, question that all of us kind of grapple with. The second piece that I came to was where do we come from? Or how did we get here? And that turns out to be much more interesting in the sense that science is constantly uncovering stuff about what our past is on this planet, constantly revising our concept of how long we've been here and what we have done along the way. So these are not simple questions. The last question that I asked when I started embracing this concept was the same one that Gauguin asked, is like, where are we going? And how will we know when we get there, kind of thing. This is a question that neither science nor we individually can answer. This is a collective question that our society has to answer, our civilization, our culture has to answer, figure out where are we going with any of this. And I, like many of you, when the human race came up, I went into kind of a dark place, and I kind of thought, It's sort of a tragic story the way it seems to be unfolding at this time. But then I started to feel like an embracing and a concept that we are what we make of the planet at any given moment. So this is our planet to decide how we want to do things. It's easy enough to kind of give up and say, okay, so it's washing over me, and what can I do? And Miami's sinking, and where we are. But I'm thinking if there's anything to be done, it's us individually working collectively with each other in community to try to make things right. And and that's what I'm doing here today is because I said, oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful day. Do I really want to go down to the cave? And the answer was yes, because it has to do with community and community building. So I'm thinking, I'm so glad that we all showed up today, and that Sharon's filming this so we can like send it out to just musing thoughts. It's so interesting that the artists of our culture are the ones who are the deeper thinkers, and the artifacts that we create, as much as we're embedded in them and invested in them, they are simply the medium by which we speak. And so that piece speaks to all the different kinds of investigation that have gone on throughout the years. In this case, the hollowness and the basicness of nature is constantly being examined and re-examined in a way that that every generation looks inside of what's inside them, the hollowness of what the world that we live in, and has to answer that question: who are we? How do we get here? And I wanted to portray that through as many different forums as possible. Some people are looking in, some people are looking up, some people are looking sideways. It seems like we're not all together, but in reality, we kind of are all together doing this investigative piece. I think that's all I have to say about my piece. Is there any questions? And, oh, thank you, thank you. And like your piece, Linda, at some point it's like you put the hours into it and you're thinking, this thing is never going to sell. Nobody's going to say, I think I want that on my dining room table.
What am I doing? 20 hours.
Do you also paint
Art educator, so I paint and draw, sometimes leading up to what I'm doing, but I have been bitten by the ceramic sculpture bug and won't let me go. So pardon?
Did you say you teach?
I taught out at Hawkinson, at the high school out at Hawkinson for 25 years. And it was every hat. It was like every kind of art. So I like dive into art history, and I wanted to give the kids a little window into the depths of what it is that we're doing, and so forth and so on. I'm gonna, if anybody is interested, I'm gonna do a quick spiel here. In August this year, down at the Esther Short Park, they're doing the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of August is the Vancouver Art and Music Festival, and I have decided to work with my sculpture group to do a big raku demonstration, and we did one out in Troutdale last weekend, and it was totally fun and totally cool. But in order to do this raku demonstration, we need artwork to be able to fire at the event. And so I'm inviting everybody who's had any interest in art to come over to my studio on the 22nd of this month, in a couple weeks, and also in July 20th, to attend basically a free workshop. $20 in the can buys you clay, glaze, materials, gas, and then you spend 2 hours in my little workshop making a little animal sculpture. I back off of people who kind of know what they're doing, but I assisting anybody who's like never did anything like this before, so give me a hand. And what we do it is we fired over 50 masts at Troutdale last weekend, and it was like a 2 6-hour days of doing nothing but getting hot stuff with tongs and bringing it out, put it in the raku chamber to smoke and whatnot. It's totally fun and totally cool. So I'm inviting anybody that has the slightest bit of interest. I've got a card here with my Gmail on it, and if you want to consider doing that, give me a shout out on the Gmail. I will put you on a list, and then we'll know about how many people will be coming to this event. So. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody? You take one if you, Linda.